Okay, so I'm back with my non-fiction wrap-up of Best Books 2018. This is much shorter than my fiction one, so it should be nice and quick. I'll try and do this as fast as I can for you. Again, I won't be holding up the books, it takes too long. I'm just going to put a digital picture of each cover here for you. So, first up, this will come as no surprise, is Eggshell Skull by Bree Lee. This was one of my most anticipated reads of 2018. I mentioned it in a few videos. It ended up being definitely just that. I felt a full emotional roller coaster while reading this book. It's very familiar to, me as a millennial woman, an Australian woman. This is an absolutely clear-eyed feminine force of a memoir. This is so necessary. It was released at the perfect time, the perfect climate for it. We need to be hearing these stories. We need to be putting them on pedestals and sharing them with the world, because it's so important for women everywhere to know that, or can come out about things that have happened to them, and that people will support them even if the justice system doesn't. I even held back tears during the acknowledgements of this book. That's how much it affected me. So highly recommend this. I don't need to say much more about it, but you really should go out there and get a copy of this book right now. Next on the list is Maggie O'Farrell's I Am. This has been big on BookTube, so I probably don't need to review it too much. But this is essentially Maggie O'Farrell's non-fiction retellings of her 17 brushes with death throughout her life. Some of these stories are so emotive. She discusses miscarriage. She discusses, being followed by a man who later turned out to be a very bad man. Each of these stories lingers long after its conclusion. I listened to this on audiobook. It was narrated by O'Farrell herself, and it was just brilliantly told. I felt the full force of her emotions and her experiences in these stories as she read it herself. Each of the stories portray thought-provoking truths about the human existence, the human experience, I should say. And I think that you'll be able to relate to at least something in there. So highly recommend it. Definitely on audio if you have that accessible to you. Audiobooks can be really brilliant, so definitely give it a go. Next on the list is another Australian book, The Trauma Cleaner by Sarah Krasnostein. This came out last year and I spoke about it a fair bit on my channel, and it's one of my favourite non-fiction reads, 1000%. It is so brilliant, it is so unique, this story of Sandra Pankhurst. She lives on in my head, and I read this right at the beginning of the year last year. She is a trans woman who grew up in a really rocky time in Australia, at a time where queer people were not accepted and were treated very poorly. She started off as in a male body as a father, and had to leave her wife and her child to basically become the person who she truly was. She experienced life as a sex worker, and many other things, and then eventually ended up, which is what she does now, working as a trauma cleaner, cleaning up crime scenes and deceased estates around Melbourne. So that part of the book really intrigued me, as well as the queer factor, as well as the trans factor. So there's so many interesting things about this book. It's just packed full of a unique, dense and intense story, and it will live on with you. I think it would be excellent on audio. I read it in paperback, but any form, just digest this. It's just so good. Written from someone else's perspective, by the way. Sarah Krasnostein is the writer. Five stars for sure. Next on the list is The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson. Yes, Maggie Nelson. Sorry, for a minute there I thought, because of the two Maggies, I got confused. This book, wow. This has been on my shelf for a long time, and being pregnant, I thought, you know what, I should pick it up now, because I know that she was pregnant while she was writing a lot of this. It just blew my socks off. Like, I wasn't expecting this, really, much of an impact from this book. It's one of the most unique non-fiction books I've ever read. It's brilliant. Nelson has a way of discussing philosophical explorations of pregnancy, sexuality, motherhood, gender norms, challenging gender norms, to be honest, if you're not open to discussions of bodily excretions, heavy sex scenes, and just pure openness about the human experience, especially throughout pregnancy and birth, then this isn't for you. But I was so captivated by her unique ability to just say it as she's thinking it, and to not put these filters over her words, and just be honest and open and raw and far out, man. I can't wait to read more of her work. It was bloody brilliant, so highly recommend. Next we have And Now We Have Everything on Motherhood Before I Was Ready by Megan O'Connell. This book was the perfect, again, all of these non-fictions kind of came at the perfect time for me. This book came before I got pregnant, but it was just a really pivotal point in my year, and I needed this book at the time, and it was just so well done. I will put a trigger warning here. There is quite a heavy traumatic birth scene in this book, so if you're pregnant, don't read it. I wouldn't be able to read it right now because I know it was quite traumatic. But if you're not pregnant, or you've already had your children, or you don't have any issues talking about birth, then definitely give this a go. I think that millennial people who want to, or think they may want to have children at some point, would really benefit from this book, because she goes into quite a lot of depth discussing the topic of whether she's ready and how she probably wasn't ready. And I think that someone also wrote, Sheila Heti wrote a book on this sort of topic as well, and I read them both around the same time, and I didn't get along with Motherhood by Sheila Heti. I found that quite tedious, boring. It wasn't what I wanted. This book was exactly what I needed. So I think that if you didn't like Motherhood by Sheila Heti, you may like this one. If you did like Motherhood, you may not like this one. I think it depends on you as a person, but I loved it. 5 stars. Excellent book. 2 left, and they're both Australian. Number 1 is Any Ordinary Day by Lee Sales. Lee Sales is quite a prominent newsreader and journalist here in Australia. Everybody loves her. Anyone who listens to Chat 10 Looks 3, the podcast with her and Annabelle Crabb, will know what I mean. Lee discusses how throughout her life she has dealt with a lot of personal close experiences and encounters with trauma and death and tragedy as a newsreader, and she wanted to discuss resilience and traumatic life-changing events and how they shape us, and what the chances are of them happening to us, what the statistics really are of us leaving the house and something tragic happening to us on our way to work. It's such a brilliant concept and interesting topic, and she does it so well because, again, she's a journalist, so she's written it from such an excellent perspective. I found it quite emotional, heartwarming. It was almost, I thought this book would make me anxious, but it actually did the opposite. It kind of reaffirmed the unrealistic control we think we have over our lives when we really just don't. We're really just, it's all chance, and it's all just nonsense. And the people in this book that have experienced life-changing events just are so marvelous and inspirational, and it's just such a brilliant book. I really recommend you listen to the audiobook, which is what I did. And last but definitely not least is The Hate Race by Maxine Beneba Clark. This book came out quite a few years ago, and I'm kind of sad that it took me this long to get around to reading it, but at the same time it doesn't matter because I've read it now and it was bloody brilliant. It's basically a take on growing up in Australia as a woman of colour, and how she was treated and still is treated, and just the nonsense that people of colour deal with, the disgusting racism in Australia, and what it's like to really live as a person of colour experiencing that. I think that every Australian should read this book. I think it's one of those books that it should be in the school curriculum. It should be something that everybody understands before they leave school. It shouldn't be something that we have to really start thinking about as adults, because it should already be embedded in us that this is a problem and we need to do more about this. And I just think this book is brilliant. There's also a lot of nostalgia in this book because Maxine Beneba Clarke did grow up in Australia and have a lot of the same experiences that white people did in terms of, you know, the Women's Weekly cake book that our parents all had and made us birthday cakes out of each year and things like that. So I just think it's brilliant, and I just think that Maxine Beneba Clarke is a powerhouse of a woman, and she's written some amazing stuff, and this is one of them, so you should give it a go. And that is it for my non-fiction wrap up. I'm so proud to get through these videos because I've been thinking about doing this since December last year. As I said, it's been really hard because of the heat, so I had a cool day today, and I'm really happy to get them done and to share them with you all and to start fresh this year. And I've already read some really excellent books, so I will wrap them up very soon. And that is all I have for you. But thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate every single one of you, and I hope we can chat some more in the comments and as I film more videos in the future. On Instagram I'm just polyreader, and on Goodreads I'm polyreader Amy. So I will speak to you soon, guys. Thanks again for being here. Bye!